In 1910, the New York City Police Department patrolled a city of nearly 5 million people, almost entirely on foot. 60 years later, that same department was operating one of the largest motor fleets on the planet, thousands of vehicles grinding through the most congested streets in America. But the cars New York chose were the opposite of what you'd expect. While other cities chased speed, NYPD chased something else entirely. And the reason why explains one of the strangest facts in American police history. The biggest police fleet in the country was almost never built for the chase. When most people picture an American police car, they picture a pursuit, a high-speed chase down an open highway. That image was built by cities like Los Angeles, where wide boulevards and freeways made speed the defining quality of a patrol car. New York City was the exact opposite. And because it was the opposite, NYPD built its enormous fleet around a completely different set of priorities that had almost nothing to do with how fast a car could go. You'll see why the department's very first cars were convertibles, with a strange rule about keeping the top down. You'll see the exact day in 1932 that radio changed American policing forever, broadcast from a transmitter hidden beneath the dome of police headquarters. You'll see how every new radio car quietly erased 2-foot patrolmen from the streets. And you'll see why the car that mattered most to New York was judged not by its horsepower, but by whether it could survive 8 hours of stop-and-go abuse without falling apart. To understand all of it, you have to start in a city being policed almost entirely on foot. In 1910, New York City was already the largest city in the United States by an enormous margin, with a population approaching 5 million. Policing it was a monumental task, and the NYPD did it almost entirely on foot. The beat cop, walking a fixed route, knowing every block, every shopkeeper, every troublemaker, was the fundamental unit of New York policing. Mounted officers on horseback handled crowd control and covered the larger avenues. The motor vehicle, in 1910, was still a rarity in the department. This made a certain sense. Manhattan was densely packed. Distances between incidents were short. A foot officer could reach most of his beat quickly because the beat itself was small. The car, in this environment, did not offer the obvious advantage it held in a sprawling western city. But New York was already inching toward the automobile. The department formed a dedicated motorcycle squad in 1911 to chase down the growing menace of speeding motorists. And by 1911, there were Ford Model T cars photographed at police headquarters. In 1919, the NYPD established a formal automobile squad. The age of the machine was coming, even to a city built for the foot patrolman. And here is one of the strangest, most charming details of that early era. New York City's first police cars were convertibles, and not by accident. Patrol officers were under standing orders to keep the top down at all times, so that citizens could see the officers' uniform hats and know at a glance that the vehicle was a police car. Rain was no excuse. Even snow was no guarantee that an officer would be granted permission to raise the top. That required special approval from a superior. In an age before sirens were universal and flashing lights were standard, the visible silhouette of a cop in his hat was the original police car warning light. But New York could not stay a foot and convertible department forever, for one simple reason: the criminals were getting cars of their own. By the 1910s and the 1920s, motorized criminals could move between boroughs, across bridges, and out of the city faster than any foot officer or mounted unit could respond. The NYPD began acquiring motor vehicles in greater numbers through the 1920s, and the department's own historians mark the 1920s and 1930s as the period when New York truly began regularly using motorized patrol cars. The early NYPD cars were civilian vehicles pressed into service with minimal modification, much like every other department in America in this era. There was no police package car yet. A department bought a sedan, painted it, equipped it, and put officers in it. New York even developed its own distinctive color scheme well before the famous national black and white appeared. NYPD cars of the late 1920s wore green bodies, white roofs, and black front fenders. These were ordinary cars doing an extraordinary job in the most demanding driving environment in the country. Here is what made NYPD different from every other department from the very beginning: scale. By the 1920s, the NYPD was already one of the largest police organizations in the world, with tens of thousands of officers. As the department motorized, even equipping a fraction of those officers with cars meant buying vehicles in quantities that dwarfed almost every other department in America. This scale created a unique dynamic. When a small-town department bought 10 patrol cars, it took whatever the local dealer happened to offer. When NYPD bought hundreds or eventually thousands of vehicles, the manufacturers paid attention. New York's fleet purchases were large enough to influence what Detroit was willing to build. The department was not just a customer, it was a force in the market, one big enough to bend the supply chain toward its own needs. The single most transformative change in NYPD's early motor history, though, was not a car at all. It was the two-way radio, and New York's role in that revolution can be dated almost to the hour. On February 25, 1932, beneath the dome of police headquarters in Manhattan, the NYPD made its first official radio broadcast to a patrol car. The transmitter carried the call letters WPEG, a 1,000-watt station built to send instructions out to vehicles on the street. Police Commissioner Edward P. Mulrooney hailed the first broadcast as a wonderful success. That same year, the department installed its first radio receiver in a marked sedan, and gave that new kind of vehicle a name it still uses today, the Radio Motor Patrol, or RMP. The department threw itself into the new technology. It distributed 50,000 leaflets to the citizens of New York with a simple message: "Help yourself by helping us," urging the public to telephone the police, who would dispatch an RMP. A dispatcher sat at a U-shaped table at headquarters, detailed maps of every precinct and patrol post laid under glass, relaying calls out to the cars by voice. By April 1934, just 2 years after that first broadcast, there were already 304 radio-equipped RMPs prowling the city. Before radio, a patrol car had been a roving unit that had to physically find a call box or a telephone kiosk to receive its next assignment. After radio, a patrol car became a mobile extension of Central Command, dispatchable, directable, and dramatically more effective. For a department the size of the New York Police Department, this was revolutionary. It meant that a fleet of hundreds of cars could be coordinated from a single room, sent to incidents in real time, and managed as one system rather than a scattering of independent units. The radio turned the New York Police Department's growing fleet from a group of cars into a network. But radio created a new problem, a technical one that would come to define what kind of car the New York Police Department actually needed. A radio drew electrical power, and the early sets were power-hungry, bulky, and fragile. A radio-equipped car idling for hours, powering its receiver and later its transmitter, placed demands on a vehicle's electrical system that ordinary civilian cars were never designed to handle. The early radio pioneers knew this pain intimately. When a Detroit officer and an engineering student first managed to fit a working radio into a Model T back in the 1920s, the batteries would not even fit inside the car. They had to be strapped to the running boards, and they needed recharging every 4 hours. Multiply that fragility across a fleet of hundreds of cars idling in Manhattan gridlock, where a patrol car might sit still more than it moved, and the central challenge of the New York police car comes into focus. Top speed did not matter on these streets. Survival did. To understand NYPD's fleet, you have to abandon the idea of the high-speed chase entirely. In Manhattan, the high-speed chase was largely a fiction. The streets were a grid, permanently congested, with traffic lights every block and pedestrians everywhere. A patrol car that could reach 130 miles per hour was useless because there was nowhere in the city it could ever reach 130 miles per hour. The relevant speed in New York was the speed of getting through a crowded intersection, not the speed of an open highway. This single fact set NYPD on a completely different path from the speed-obsessed Western departments, where the California Highway Patrol, founded in 1929 and already in love with the open road, wanted the fastest car it could buy. NYPD wanted something far less glamorous and far more practical. It wanted a car that would not break. City patrol work is brutal on a vehicle in ways that highway patrol simply is not. Consider what a New York patrol car endured in a single 8-hour shift. It idled for hours, powering its radio and equipment. It made hundreds of stops and starts, working the brakes and transmission constantly. It crawled through traffic at low speed, which meant the engine ran hot without the cooling airflow that highway speed naturally provides. It pounded over potholes, curbs, and the brutal road surfaces of a city that never stopped tearing itself up and rebuilding. A civilian car subjected to this treatment wore out fast, brakes overheated and warped, transmissions burned out, engines overheated from constant low-speed running. Electrical systems failed under the radio load. The car that survived New York was not the fastest car on the lot, it was the toughest one, and toughness, not speed, became the organizing principle of the largest police fleet in America. This is where NYPD's enormous scale became a weapon. Because the department bought vehicles in such staggering quantities, it could specify exactly what it needed, and Detroit would build it. NYPD needed heavy-duty cooling systems to handle constant idling. It needed reinforced brakes to survive endless stop-and-go work. It needed beefed-up electrical systems to power radios. It needed transmissions and suspensions built for abuse rather than for top speed. These were precisely the kinds of components that would eventually define the factory police package. It's worth noting that no American automaker even offered special law enforcement upgrades until Ford introduced its first factory police package in 1950, with Chrysler and General Motors following in the mid-1950s. And when those packages arrived, the heavy-duty components inside them, the cooling, the electrical, the brakes, the durability hardware, addressed exactly the problems that high-volume urban departments like NYPD had been wrestling with for 2 decades. The police package was, in large part, an answer to the city patrol durability problem that New York embodied more than anywhere else on Earth. Through the 1930s and the 1940s, NYPD standardized on 2-door Plymouth radio cars, practical, durable, no-nonsense machines. By the 1950s, the department was running the Ford RMP, the Radio Motor Patrol sedan that became a fixture on the streets, and by the 1970s, the Plymouth Fury was the unmistakable mainstay of New York policing, the boxy, workmanlike cruiser that anyone who has seen the film Serpico will instantly recognize. Across all of it ran a single thread. These were mainstream American sedans chosen primarily for durability, serviceability, and cost, not for raw performance. The department needed cars its own vast mechanical operation could maintain and repair efficiently, with parts that were cheap and available everywhere. An exotic high-performance car was the wrong choice for New York, not because it was too fast, but because it was too hard and too expensive to keep running across a fleet of thousands. And the scale of that fleet was almost difficult to comprehend. Even in the early radio era of 1932, the department already operated around 800 automobiles. By the 1960s, the NYPD numbered roughly 30,000 officers, larger than many national armies, and its motor fleet ran well into the thousands of vehicles. The department maintained its own extensive fleet maintenance infrastructure, with garages, mechanics, and parts operations sized to keep that enormous number of cars on the road simultaneously. Where a typical American city measured its fleet in dozens or low hundreds, NYPD measured its fleet in thousands, and every single decision about which car to buy was multiplied by that staggering scale. If this kind of deep police car history is something you want more of, hit subscribe, badges and chrome covers exactly this kind of story every week. Now, the conventional story of the American police car is a story about speed. It's about pursuit, horsepower, and the chase, and it was largely written by Los Angeles and the California Highway Patrol. But there is a strong argument that the department which actually shaped the everyday American police car most profoundly was not the one chasing hot rodders on freeways. It was the one crawling through Manhattan gridlock. And the reason comes down to a single word that almost never appears in cop car history. When we tell the story of how the American police car was created, we tell a story about performance. The Mustang SSP, the Hemi-powered pursuit Mopars, the California Highway Patrol's relentless demand for ever more speed. The narrative is built around the fastest cars and the most dramatic chases, and it hands the credit for the modern police car to the departments that wanted to go fast. But this narrative has a blind spot. Speed is only relevant for a tiny fraction of what a police car actually does. The vast majority of a patrol car's life is not spent in pursuit. It's spent idling, responding, patrolling slowly, and enduring. And the department that embodied that reality more than any other was New York. Here is the overlooked truth. The features that make a modern police car are the heavy-duty cooling, the upgraded electrical system, the reinforced brakes, and the durability engineering. They are not pursuit features, they are endurance features. They exist to let a car survive thousands of hours of hard, low-speed, high-abuse urban service. And the departments that needed those features most desperately and bought in the volume to make Detroit build them were the big urban departments like the New York Police Department. The glamorous pursuit features, the big engines, the high top speeds were always a relatively small part of the police package story, demanded by a handful of highway agencies. The durability features were the heart of it, demanded by the high-volume city departments that did the everyday work. The American police car was shaped at least as much by the need to survive a city as by the need to win a chase. Consider the car that actually defined American policing for decades, the Ford Crown Victoria. The Crown Victoria became legendary not because it was fast, but because it was nearly indestructible. It could absorb endless abuse, idle for hours, take a beating, and keep running with cheap, simple maintenance. Those were exactly the qualities a department like the New York Police Department had been demanding since the 1930s. The rugged body-on-frame durability that made the Crown Victoria the longest-serving police car in American history was the direct descendant of the City Patrol durability doctrine, the philosophy that a police car's first job is to endure and only occasionally to chase. There's an even deeper consequence buried in this story, one that reaches beyond the cars themselves and into the nature of policing. Remember what the radio car actually replaced. The NYPD's own historians noted a simple, profound piece of arithmetic. Because a radio car was crewed by 2 officers, every new 2-man RMP put into service allowed the department to eliminate 2-foot posts. Car by car, radio by radio, the beat cop who walked a fixed route and knew every face on his block was replaced by a mobile, dispatchable unit that could be anywhere in minutes, but knew the neighborhood far less intimately. The durable radio-equipped patrol car didn't just change what New York drove. It changed the fundamental relationship between the police and the policed, trading the intimacy of the foot patrolman for the speed and reach of the network. The car built for the grind reshaped the city it ground through. So the biggest police fleet in America was never really built for the chase. It was built for the grind, the relentless, unglamorous, stop-and-go reality of patrolling the most demanding city in the country. And in being built for the grind, NYPD and departments like it quietly shaped the everyday American police car more profoundly than the speed-chasing highway agencies that get all the attention. The next time you picture a police car, the high-speed chase is the wrong image. The right image is a sedan idling at a Manhattan intersection at 3 in the morning, radio crackling, engine running hot, built above all else to simply keep going. That car, the durable one, the city one, is the real American police car, and New York, more than anywhere, is where its priorities were forged. In 1910, the New York City Police Department patrolled a city of 5 million people almost entirely on foot, in convertibles with the tops kept down so people could see the officers' hats. 60 years later, it operated one of the largest motor fleets on the planet, thousands of cars, grinding through the most congested streets in America, chosen not for speed but for the sheer ability to endure. New York never had the open highways that made other departments fall in love with horsepower. What it had instead was scale, gridlock, and a relentless daily grind that destroyed weak cars and rewarded tough ones. And because NYPD bought in such enormous numbers and started broadcasting orders to its cars as early as 1932, its demand for durability helped shape what Detroit built for every department in the country. The high-speed chase makes for a better thumbnail, but the everyday American police car, the one that idles, responds, endures, and keeps running through years of hard city service, owes more to the gridlock of Manhattan than to the open road. The biggest police fleet in America was built for the grind, and the grind, far more than the chase, is what a police car actually does. This is Badges and Chrome, the channel that covers the police car's history almost forgot. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.